My name is Barry Pierre, and my elder brother introduced me to the credit union. I was a young soldier then. My wife now, we weren't married yet, but we were living together. Things were a little tough, and we needed an institution that could assist us to move forward in life. Banks wasn't doing it because of the criteria to get loans or to get money borrowed. Most of the things that my wife and I have and have accomplished was through the credit union. From building our first home in Belmont to educating our children, purchasing my first car, all came from the credit union. Basically, the credit union financed the education of my wife. She's now an accountant. It took some years, but the credit union stuck with me throughout.
One day I went to work and they said I had a gas pain and I ended up in the hospital. While I was in the hospital, they tell me I need to do an angiogram. 14,000 something to do the angiogram. Then they said I have to do a heart surgery, open heart surgery, $175,000. I was able to get help out to get the loan to see about my operation. To the credit union. While I was doing that, I ended up in a coma for 10 days, which went over the amount of $175,000. And they stand up with me and paid all my bills. And I'm living testimony to say that I'm going to sit down here talking today. And from there on, I never left there, and they helped me a great deal in life. To bring up my children, send them to school, buy new vehicle, pay for vehicle, insurance, everything.
There were some opportunities, that came my way. If it wasn't for the credit union, it would not have happened, right? One of them was my education. I went to St. Joseph's Convent in Port of Spain. When I left school, I wanted to further myself. I decided to do the associate's degree in computer science, right, in the Hearst. And of course, the credit union was right there. In fact, that was the first time that I was able to get a loan. And of course, with the guidance of the loans officers at the time, they were very, very kind and accommodating, right? Because of the credit union, I got my first little loan, got my degree, my associate's degree initially in computer science. I had a hunger for IT and so on, so I decided to do the Bachelor of Science degree. So again, where did I go? To the credit union.
I'm Kester Fraser from Roxburgh, Tobago. I had a good friend. He introduced me to the credit union. From there was up the road for me, like refurbishing my house and thing. It was no problem. The staff was so nice to me. So every time I go to them for a loan, I believe it was just so easy. Down the road where my mother just come and pass away, they did a loan for me to bury my mother. I just had to come and collect the money. At that time, when Hurricane Ivan did pass, I had a small damage on my house, a small damage by the flood, and they called me and asked me what happened, and they actually gave me a disaster loan. The service that I got from the credit union, people was amazed. Yeah, some credit union you may not get that service.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to part 2 of getting the best out of your relationship with Alysaa, Gazon, and Western United Credit Union. We are streaming live here at our headquarters at number 40 Fifth Street in Port of Spain, and we welcome all of you this evening. I hope you have your huzzies, your children, your wife, and everybody around you as we get together for another dynamic webinar this evening. Good evening.
Hey, how are you?
I am cool and mellow, thank you. So great. So we are back together once again in part 2 of getting the best out of your relationships. And people have been asking for it, so here we are, so that we will continue to build and give people the tools of living good lives, good relationships with each other.
Yes, definitely.
So often we tend to see certain signs and we may either ignore them, or some of us may be brave enough to address certain things and looking at conflict not as a bad word, but actually a good word in terms of resolving relationship issues. So what are some of the signs that we can look for in terms of a healthy relationship in our lives?
Yes. You know, I'm really glad that we are starting off with this question, because I feel that so often we get focused on figuring out what may go wrong or what we have to be suspicious of when it comes to relationships, that we don't think about what may be going right or what we're doing well. So what can we look for to recognize these good things, or the green flags instead of the red flags that everyone is so fixated on? So as you were just mentioning during the last webinar, you know, the strongest, I said that the strongest relationships have their own culture. And it's, you know, their traditions, their values, their rules, and it could be very strange to someone looking in, right? And once both partners experience that sense of safety and connection in their relationships, it's okay if it looks strange. So remember, the relationship is about what you want to build. So your green flags would look very different from my green flags. And it can even look very different to someone who you feel that you're so close with. It's all relative. So here are a few of the things that we could look for to see if our relationship is truly healthy. And it's quite basic, to be quite honest.
Yes.
The first one is being able to be your healthy, full, authentic self. Yeah? And not feeling that there's some sort of performative act that you need to put on to appease your partner or to maintain the partner. It should really be that true mutual acceptance of each other. And then the second part would be communication. Yes, we all say it, but communication, even through disagreements. And we spoke, and you spoke a while ago, about how conflict could be used as a learning opportunity. And it could be really beneficial in bringing us closer to our partners. And we want that sense that both people in the relationship are taking responsibility for working at the relationship. And when you view the relationship as a team, you want to see both people winning, right? So breaking down that issue of communication even further, you want to make sure that people are communicating and saying what they need. Because far too often in my work with couples, I often hear, well, you know, this person has been with me so long, they should know what I want. But nobody is a mind reader, no one. And communicating your wants and your needs can be very, very empowering. And that's what we want to see. That's a huge red flag. You want to feel empowered in your relationship. And then the last thing we should look for resides in us. Are we giving off the green flags? Are you being the person that you would even want to be around? Because far too often we are looking for the answer in somebody else, and we're not taking stock of our own accountability in relationships as well. So those are just a couple quick things that we can look for to tell.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that at the end there, because one of the things in preparing for today, over the weekend and even today, that came to my mind is, okay, we want to have good relationships. But are we having good relationships with ourselves, a good relationship with me? How do I feel about me as an individual? And can I live with me?
Yeah.
And if I can answer that in the affirmative, then I think, and you would guide me here, of course, that it should be easy to live with someone else. If I'm happy with myself, if I'm happy with who I am, if I'm seeing that clear vision that I grew up with, that it is unfolding. And if I am brave enough when I am going off course to bring myself back on to say, no, this is not who I am, but this is who I want to be and live, and let that person come forward.
Yes, yes. And it's, you know, you're so right talking about that journey of checking in with yourself and being at peace with yourself. And really, if you're not at peace with yourself, it's very unlikely that you will find peace residing in someone else. We really have to check in with ourselves.
And that is so true. So the other question that I have here for you this evening is, how do we manage peace?
Yeah.
And you know, there's an old hymn that we love so dearly to sing, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me.
Yes.
But
yes.
How do we manage peace in or after having an experience, a hurtful experience, an abusive experience, especially from someone whom we would have trusted so dearly with our thoughts, with our hearts, with our very feelings, and that person come and really disappointed us? How do we find peace within that experience?
Yes, that's a good question. And you know, I want to acknowledge that our experiences can really, really do a number on us. But what I often hear in this regard is that finding peace is sometimes used synonymously with finding closure. And that closure is usually tied to some sort of action involving this person that, you know, as you said, we would have trusted them and they would have wronged us in the first place. So we're thinking about that last conversation, or we're seeking some sense of confirmation to what we know. We truly know it within ourselves, but we're still looking outward. So closure in this context, you know, finding peace is a process that you have to create yourself, and it helps you to move along. But I want to highlight that it's a process. Peace is not it's not a destination, it's a journey instead of a destination. Yeah. And it's not about that sense of I have reached the idea of peace in my life. It's a process. And more often than not, people are not necessarily available to give us that closure. Yes? So we have to say that we have found closure without the person. We don't want to be forever stuck waiting for certain conditions to be satisfied for us to accept that the end is here. So usually the end has long passed us, and we have to decide when we want to let go. And yes, I know that it's a very difficult process, but I want to talk a little bit about the practice of self-compassion, because a lot of times when we are wronged, we lose that trust in ourselves and we come down so hard on ourselves for not knowing better, when in fact we should be doing the opposite. We should be very gentle with ourselves. We need to have that empathy for the version of ourselves that experienced the hurt or the trauma. We need to acknowledge that we have learned and we were operating back then with less information than we have now. So to build that resilience that could lead us along the journey of finding peace, we have to allow ourselves to grieve the loss of the relationship, to grieve the loss of who we thought we were, what we thought the relationship was, grieve the loss of our confidence sometimes. And while it can be helpful to speak to the person that wronged us, it might foster some awareness or some understanding for us. The real closure, the real peace comes when we focus on our intention and our action for the future. And in that way, it's really more about our experience, our peace, not the influence of somebody else.
And sometimes, would it help to try and understand that this person themselves may be a broken person and fighting their way through to do the best that they can do, the best that they know how, because sometimes we grow up in households that are very broken. And we see mommy and daddy fighting, and it is always a ball of confusion within the household, and that is all they know to give. So sometimes it might be a bit easier to find the peace in knowing that this person is broken.
Yeah.
Not that you are condoning their behavior, but you're just trying to understand that they too need help.
Right. Well, I often like to reframe the perspective that people are broken and, somehow beyond love. What I would like to reframe that as is that we are complex. We're complex beings, and we are truly trying to find our way. Sometimes we stumble, sometimes we fall, but it's more about the complexities of humans and human behavior, and recognizing that humanity and understanding that it's not always black or white. Sometimes we have to get comfortable in that space of gray.
Okay. Well, I am, you have me frightened now to ask the third question. But I would ask it nonetheless, and you will rephrase it. Should broken people rush into relationships? And I think this is what makes things a lot more complex. That you are not ready for a relationship, but because you are lonely, because you feel you must have someone there in your life to share the journey with, that you now finish a relationship. You haven't taken the time to find out why it didn't work out. Who was at fault? If you were at fault, if they were at fault, but there you are in another relationship already. What's your thoughts on that?
It happens. And I think it's a great question. I know you were resistant to ask it, but I think it's a really good question. And I will echo that reframing of the idea that we are broken and somehow beyond love. We are whole. We're whole people who have had a number of different experiences which have influenced us positively and sometimes not that positively. But we cope, and we need to honor those lived experiences, right? And I will say, you don't need to be fully healed. I know this is a hot take here. You don't need to be fully healed to be in a relationship. And why that is for the reason that we are never fully healed. And let me explain. Relationships hurt us. They sometimes create feelings of abandonment and betrayal and hurt and trauma and shame. But what is the antidote for shame? What is the antidote for feeling so unlovable, so alienated? The antidote is connection. So it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. You're right about that. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It could be the relationship that we have with our friends, our support network, or even the one that we have with ourselves. So whether that relationship is with ourselves or we are rebuilding trust and honesty in another relationships, we can find comfort in the fact that while relationships can hurt us, it is through connection and relationships that we can find a process of healing as well, because people aren't necessarily broken. People are imperfect beings who have experienced things that led to poor coping and survival tactics and unhelpful patterns. But it is possible to be a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time. I heard that somewhere and I thought that it was such a great saying, because we are in this state of simultaneously being healed and in the process of healing. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's no point that we could just shut off and say, well, that's it. I'm completed, I'm closured, I'm healed. We are never fully healed. We're always working through it. And for those wonderful viewers who may be thinking, well, I don't know what this lady is talking about. I am perfect. They may be thinking that. But you can still be the whole package and you're at the wrong address. So,
Yes.
so it's not necessarily about being completed or being healed. We're always in that process of working through our experiences. And that's why people are so complex.
Well, I am feeling complex after the answer for that question. No, but I get you, and what I like, and while you were talking, and there's a blend, and I something that came to mind is that as a child you will have a broken crayon, and there are also some quotes on this, but I just want to bring the point home that you have broken crayons in your desk. And those same broken crayons can bring beauty. So I guess what you were saying is even in our brokenness, we can bring beauty.
That's right.
However, I know some people, they always use this as a cop out or an excuse, at least as far as I'm concerned, that I am being abusive, I'm being disrespectful. And then they say, well, I'm a work in process.
Right.
What is that all about, Alysaa? I mean, what is that about? I am a work in process, but I am hurting you. I am disrespecting you. But the other person is supposed to just sit there and take it, tolerate it.
Yeah. So I think it's important to note that that demonstrates a lack of accountability, because as an aside, let's say behavior that we term toxic, let's say lying or abuse or manipulation, gaslighting, all of those buzzwords, they are not an excuse. You know, you can't say, well, I'm a work in progress. That's not taking accountability for your behavior. And it's important to know that even being a work in progress, the experience isn't invalid. Yes, you can be a work in progress, but you're still using that black and white narrative of wrong and right. We are so complex that we can be a work in progress and take accountability for what wrong we are doing, yeah, or what hurt we have inflicted. It's not about absolving ourselves from accountability.
Good. I'm glad that you brought some clarity there. Just in case some people want to run off and say that I'm a work in progress. So, yeah, you know, I can do what I want. I can say what I want, disregard the other party's feelings, and think that that is totally acceptable. Which brings me exactly into another great question, is what makes people repeat certain unhelpful behavior patterns throughout different relationships? Because we go into relationships, or maybe in our same relationship, and we ask for forgiveness, and then after we behave well for a particular period of time, and then after that we fall back into the same pattern. Or, as I said, we go into a different relationship and the same unhelpful behavior that we had previously rears its head in this new relationship that we have. So what is the cause of that?
Yes. This is a good one. I think we have to first recognize that it's normal. A lot of us do it. It's normal to repeat patterns in relationships, in the sense that it could take us a while to become aware of ourselves, of our behaviors, about the impact that our behaviors may have on someone else. And then also becoming aware of our power, and that word, our accountability, in changing the patterns, right? Because remember, our interactions throughout our lifespan, they help us to make sense of the world. And when we look back at our relationships with our caregivers, those relationships helped us to form attachments with them. And later on, we have other attachments with our friends or our significant others, and that may influence our attachment style. Now, attachment styles, they really outline the way that we respond emotionally to others, and all of the details surrounding our behaviors, our interactions with other people. But these attachment styles are based in how we connected and how we made sense of our relationships very early on in our lives. So you may hear the term having a secure attachment style, and that means that you can have these very loving, secure relationships with others, and it's all about receiving and giving love. Or you may hear about that insecure attachment style or an anxious attachment style, where someone may have a fear of abandonment or something like that. Now, while our caregivers taught us about what is normal, if you want to say that, in relationships, and they also taught us about whether relationships are safe or not, it's not necessarily a healthy thing that they taught us. So it's very simplified to think that adult relationships are based in these same attachment styles. And that's why we have this tendency to repeat patterns in our relationships, kind of surrounding our belief that, well, this is what I saw, or this is what I was taught early on, right? The attachment styles that I was just mentioning, they were defined by a power dynamic of caregiving and dependence. But in these adult relationships that we have, whether it be with our friends or our romantic partners, they're supposed to be partnerships. So there isn't that sense of I'm necessarily depending on you. As adults, we usually care for ourselves, and unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance, we should be able to emotionally regulate ourselves. But that is the difference between being a child, who is basically powerless, and an adult, which is a more powerful type of thing. And that's where the accountability comes in as well. But an adult relationship can end if somebody is unsatisfied. If we don't do our part, the relationship can end. And the problem of repeating patterns isn't only our attachment style, but our tendency to unconsciously reenact these early relationships that we had in the context of our adult relationships. So, for example, if we had an emotionally unavailable parent, we may be triggered by someone who we feel isn't as validating to our experience the way that we want it to be. So we re-experience those fears and those early traumas that occurred in our earlier relationships. And we continue to choose people that disappoint us in the same way that we experienced previously, because we are attracted to what is familiar, as opposed to what it may actually be good for us. So these wounds that I'm talking about can often be addressed in the safe space of therapy. Sometimes we really need that focused discussion and reflection, and to learn the tools to recognize these unhelpful patterns. And in addition to that, figure out what to do once we acknowledge these patterns. So it's a process that we need to be very intentional about, to recognize those patterns that we may be perpetuating again and again. And sometimes, some people just aren't good for us. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that it isn't a good fit. And
can you repeat that again, please, Alysaa?
I said sometimes.
Yes. No, I heard what you said,
Yes.
But I think that sometimes we need to hear it, because sometimes I am of the opinion that we punish ourselves remaining in a relationship that we know isn't good for us. And I am happy that you said isn't the right fit. And that is important. So, so why am I there? What am I doing here? The relationship seems to be a constant roller coaster. I am never happy. I can never do anything or say anything that pleases you. So I think that people need to hear this point, that sometimes in our life's journey, the individual that we may have chosen, or they may have chosen us, that they are not bad, but they are just not the ones for us.
Yes.
And sometimes instead of remaining there and being so unhappy, we just need to move on in love. Yes. And I hand the floor back to you.
Yes. So I'm glad that resonated with you, because I think a lot of times it comes back to that acknowledgement that there's so much more complexity in behaviors and human relationships. And this is why we enjoy relationships. It's so different, it's so robust. There isn't a formula. It's really about that flow of what works and what doesn't work, and continuous thrashing out of issues, and getting to the point where we can just say, this isn't a good fit. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that maybe we can part peacefully.
And I often hear people say, Alysaa, and once again, I'm glad that you said exactly what you just said. I am not a failure. I have often heard people say, I don't want to walk away because I don't want another failed relationship. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you are not a good person or that you are a failure. It just simply means that it's not working out. And as I had to tell someone, the relationship has ended and you just don't know it yet. But you are just living through the motions because you don't want to walk away, because you don't want people to say, oh, there you go again. There he goes again. Another failed relationship. There she goes again. Another failed relationship. But at the end of the day, you are living and you are existing in a relationship that is already dead. What do you do?
Well, I think it's important to remember that failure is an event. It's not who we are. It's not a part of our character. It's not a part of our identity. It's not a part of our personality. It's simply an experience that we have to sit with, an experience that we can learn from if we're lucky. But there is this synthesizing of an event with our very being. And that isn't true. It's not true that we are the failure. We may have failed, the relationship may have ended, and that's okay. There is value in learning about yourself, about another, but we have to separate that idea that failure is who we are. It's not
Yes.
part of our character.
And before I go into the other question, and I know that we will have a lot to talk about here as well, because at the end of the first webinar, we said that we were going to spend some time in the art of forgiveness.
Yes.
But before we go there, when you spoke about failure, a quote came back to my mind, that failure is fertilizer for future successes. So therefore, you use it as a stepping stone, as a learning process, so that when you go into another relationship, you may not repeat the same mistakes that you had done before.
Yeah.
So you use it as a fertilizer to make yourself better.
That's right. That's right. Definitely.
Forgiveness.
Yes.
And when I was going through the Facebook page with my right-hand man, Trevlon, and we were looking at some of the responses, one person said, forgiveness. Well, I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember verbatim, but it was like, forgiveness, you really need Jesus for this one. And the answer is true. So how do you forgive? How do you forgive someone who hurt you, and understand what does it mean to forgive, and what impact does the process have on our mental health?
Yes. Now, I know this is something that you are very passionate about. Yes.
Yes.
And I would begin by saying that forgiveness is a very loaded word. So let us start with what forgiveness is not. So forgiveness does not mean that you become best friends with the person. It is not saying that what happened was okay. It's not saying that you accept the person who may have wronged you. And unlike what a lot of people think, forgiveness isn't about weakness or approval. It actually takes considerable strength to forgive. And it can mean that we decide to love the person from a distance. And I think...
And nothing is wrong with that.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Nothing is wrong with that.
Okay, you can love from a distance, or not love and be at a distance if you so choose. But love from a distance, that's what I usually like to say. But I think most importantly, forgiveness is about truly coming into your present, rather than be bound by events of the past. And I think Oprah Winfrey has this wonderful quote that says, forgiveness is about accepting that the past could not have happened any other way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's very powerful, because it's not about losing the lesson, but it is about releasing how big of an impact this incident or the series of incidents, how big of an impact it has on our emotion currently. So whether we do it actively or passively, the process, and I'm going to keep saying the word process, the process of forgiveness is truly fundamental to most of our relationships, especially that relationship with ourselves. And that's where I would start, because sometimes we would have made a mistake and we just will not let it go. And forgive ourselves. And I think that that may be a part of the reason why we have so much trouble forgiving others, because we have difficulty forgiving ourselves. And there is this cycle of blaming and shaming ourselves that we get stuck in. And if we are stuck in this cycle of blame and shame for ourselves, what would we make of it with others? Yeah, because I think what happens is we assume that people see life the way that we see life, and that isn't so. That's not what it is. If you do not seek to have an understanding of somebody else's perceptions, it can create these gaps. And it stems from miscommunication and emotional disconnection with another. So those gaps may be what causes our shock and our anger and these feelings of betrayal that get in the way of the process of forgiveness. So first, we have to respect that process of dealing with our hurt. That's the first thing. You know, that is a process that takes time. It takes time to truly explore the situation, acknowledging the impact of the betrayal, what it did for us. And again, I'm going to emphasize the importance of having that safe therapeutic space to experience that paraphrasing, that reflecting of our feelings and reflecting of what our perspective may be of the incident. So research tells us that forgiveness, whether it's active or passive, it has three common components. I'm going to list them for you. So the first one is about trying to gain a more balanced view of your perceived offender and of the event. So again, like you said earlier, really trying to understand the complexities of this person. Not black or white, not good or bad, just a person coping and moving through life. So this is very difficult to gain that balanced view, particularly when we haven't started addressing the that hurt that we've experienced, because it's difficult to have a balanced view of anything when we are still in survival mode, when we are still actively engaged in the hurt, experiencing it almost as it happened, yesterday. So we have to start getting that balanced view through activating that process with ourselves first. So that's the first component. The second one is that we actively and intentionally shift into decreasing our negative feelings toward the offender and potentially increasing compassion. So this doesn't necessarily have to happen, but the first part of decreasing our negative feelings, because again, it shifts that focus back onto us. The compassion part can come after because it can sometimes be a little bit difficult, but we do need to decrease those negative feelings, or we should at least. And then the third one is a fun one. And I'm going to say it very slowly because I want everyone to hear. It is giving up the right to punish the offender or to further demand restitution. And this is the stumbling block because we sometimes want the person to understand our pain through punishment. We want to see them hurt. We want to see them not doing well. But it is about realizing that this person's pain is separate from our own. It's separate from our experience. It's separate from our healing. And that.
And if before you go on, Alysaa, I want you to repeat that again for us, please. And maybe I can just hear some people saying, but what the hell is she talking about? What she just said there? Because I think what you just said is so critical for the healing process for self. To understand and separate the two situations. So if you would indulge me and repeat it again, so I would appreciate it.
I'm going to restate it because that's why I said I was going to say it very, very slow, because because it's difficult. And I will admit, I'm human. This is a constant reckoning, I think.
Yes.
For me as a human, where you have to give up that right to punish someone, to demand restitution, to demand that they stand and acknowledge and pay back, for what they would have done. So it truly is a challenge. I empathize. I really, really do, because we feel that if this person experiences pain or challenge or something negative, that they may somehow gain understanding of our experience. And that's not true. That's not true, because their pain and your pain are separate. It's separate from our experience. That person's pain is not going to make your pain any less. So really, it's about giving up that right.
And what I'm also hearing here, as we are dealing with the art of forgiveness, is that we must understand that we are threading a very thin line when we want to see our perpetrator suffer because of an injustice done to us. And what it also means is that we are now becoming guilty of what we have been accusing our perpetrator of. So we are now changing rules in that, okay, you have hurt me, you have wronged me. And I think we need to be very careful of that we are going to go after hurting and wronging another person just to be satisfied that you hurt me, I hurt you. I'm seeing you squirm, so yeah, we're good. But I firmly believe that we are doing or would do ourselves a great injustice if that is the position that we take. And we are not going to start the healing process. And that in itself is not forgiveness.
I think the key to all of this is understanding that this is a process. Not everyone is at or feels like they are at the enlightened state that they can just forgive and it's magical and it's flowing and emanating from them. It can take time. And I want to say to persons who may be struggling with this is that is okay. we do not get to dictate your process of forgiveness. We can talk about the benefits. We can talk about, what it does for your mental health and what it does for your present. But we don't get to say you must forgive at this very moment. And at the end of the day, forgiving somebody immediately isn't always the best idea, because then it may not be authentic, it may not be genuine. And then there's a whole different, set of ramifications that can come with that if you are repressing these emotions. We do not want to deny ourselves the right to feel our feelings and to feel those feelings of any hurt or any betrayal that we may have experienced. But I think releasing that power that somebody has over you truly does a wonder for your mental health and for your ability to be in the present rather than ruminating and just tied, just beholden to the past. But it is a process, and that is okay. We don't want any shaming and blaming of ourselves that we can't forgive fast enough, because that's not a motivator for forgiveness. It just builds that resentment. So we can just say, yes, it is a very empowering process to forgive and to feel those feelings. Remember, that's the start of the process of forgiveness, to truly process those feelings.
Wow. And I guess it's also about understanding that we do not stay in a position of being a victim.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the more we stay in a position of being a victim, is the more challenging it becomes for us to heal, to
Mm-hmm.
find forgiveness for ourselves, and to forgive the other person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes in our relationships, we see those warning signs. And for whatever reason, those warning signs that are blinking and saying that something is not right, something is a bit off, we tend to ignore it for whatever reason. Maybe because we are too afraid, as one of the words that I love that you have been using in addition to process, we are too afraid to communicate to our partner or to our children or to our friends or families. This is how I am feeling. This is how I feel about this situation. This is how I feel when you say this to me or when you do this.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to, as they would say, ruffle any feathers. We don't want those persons not to like us, or maybe to see, oh God, he miserable, or she miserable. Is always a complaint, is always a talk. But those neon lights that are flashing, and then after a while now, they became big problems that now we can't fix. But we have to come to you, Alysaa, to help us. Yes? As
Yes.
a plug, as a plug, of course, for one of the best in the world, Diane, right? Miss Douglas, and of course, Douglas and Associates Limited. And we thank you all for partnering with us to bring these tips and these healing points to our membership, and of course, for the wider community of Trinidad and Tobago that is so needed. So if we do not address these things at a very early point in the relationship, and you're seeing these signs and you don't speak, or sometimes you don't speak because it's somebody who you really like and you don't want to offend the person,
Mm-hmm.
by doing that really poses a lot of even hidden problems that we just can't get a grapple on thereafter.
Yes.
So, forgiveness.
Yes.
Forgiveness.
Yeah. And you know, when you were speaking, I was hearing a lot of those themes of needing the balance of accountability and autonomy, and then also balancing that with connection. Because what I see fairly often is this issue of not being individuated from other persons. So we see that enmeshment with other people, and that means that you are lacking that emotional separation between yourself and another person. So there are no boundaries, right? There are no boundaries. There's no communication. There's no accountability for me feeling the way that I feel and communicating that to you. It's all wrapped up, and we aren't able to identify whether we were wronged or whether we wronged the person and what is going on there. So there is this need for more individuation in relationships, and of course maintaining those boundaries. I think boundary setting would do us all some major wonders throughout
Yeah.
throughout our relationships, you know, where we are able to say, yes, this is something that works for me, or no, this is something that works for me better, and really maintaining those boundaries so we don't build resentments and we don't hold on to hurts. So if we just have a little bit more of that communication, that openness, I think we would see a lot of differences in all of our relationships.
And one of the reasons why that forgiveness is so important to me is because I think we need to understand as individuals whether the forgiveness is for ourselves or whether it's for another person, is that when we choose to forgive, is the forgiveness really for?
Yeah.
And there's this very famous prayer that Jesus taught us, the Our Father. And in the Our Father, he clearly spoke about forgiveness. And he said that we must forgive, yes, as our offender. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here. So we must forgive our offender as we would like our Heavenly Father to forgive us.
Yeah.
So therefore, as challenging and as difficult as it might be, what we are in essence telling God, and as I was preparing, I was reading Bishop T.D. Jakes' Let It Go, and there he spoke about when we understand what that prayer means and understand that what we are telling God, that we expect him to forgive us as we forgive others. So if we are unforgiving or forgive in a manner that really isn't forgiveness, then what we are in essence doing, we are blocking the bountiful blessings of God from truly coming into our lives. Because that is what we are saying. And of course, we need to understand that in no way God is saying that because he ain't forgive, I wouldn't bless you.
Yes.
Because he ain't forgive, I will not be compassionate towards you. No, that is not what he's saying. But he's saying, if you truly want forgiveness, then as challenging as it may be, we have to learn to forgive. And to forgive when it is not easy to do so. So I just wanted to stick in that little pin there.
Yes, I know this is a true passion.
No, yes, and it is. And you know why it is? Because a lot of us walk around in this world, oh gosh, and forgive me, Alysaa, so broken. Because we walk around with so much hurt and pain within ourselves. And we can find happiness and joy if we simply just be still and let it go. If we simply make a conscious decision with ourselves and our God and say, listen, I have had enough of being a victim.
Mhm.
You did not create me to be a victim, but you created me to flourish, to blossom, to enjoy the life that you have given to me. And I want that. That is what I want. So help me to forgive so that I can be happy.
Yes.
So that I can move on. And in forgiving, it doesn't mean, as we said earlier, that I have to allow you in my space.
Mhm. Mhm.
It doesn't mean that I am saying what you have done is okay. But what I am saying is, I am forgiving so that I can be healed. I am forgiving so that I can move on and find joy and happiness in my life. That is why forgiveness is so passionate to me, because there are a lot of people walking around, and sometimes you see it in their faces, you see it in their mannerism, that they are so lost, and they are so dwelling in the past that they are holding their future hostage.
Yeah.
And to me, that is very, very sad.
I hear you. I think that part of it may be that idea of still existing in a survival mode. You know, to have that space where we sit with ourselves, we sit with our experiences, and we are able to reconcile and understand the concept of grace. It is a privilege to have that space. So many of us are operating in a sense of survival, still reeling from past trauma, um, not having processed that trauma and the impact. So we truly are existing in a state of a cycle of being re-traumatized and being triggered. So having that space to sit and process is truly valuable. And I would urge anyone that has the opportunity to do that work, to do that very, very needed work, to sit and look at your pain and unpack your pain, to do so, because it is practice. It takes practice. We weren't born doing this work, and it will take some time, but the good thing about human beings is that idea of resilience, and you have to have that confidence in humanity and in our capacity to evolve.
Yeah. And as we go to a commercial break, a very brief commercial break, I just want to admonish those who are listening to us and really want to get the best out of their relationships, to understand that it starts with self. And if your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or whoever is listening to you, or they're viewing with you, look at that person. look at that person and see that first thing that you fell in love with them about. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
And as you look at them, also look at them and see the Christ in them as well. So we'll go to commercial break and we will be right back.
The credit union was small, but there was, even at that time, a sense that it could be more than it was. The earliest members of this credit union were people drawn from the port. There were port workers and workers from canning, and we built from there. What we found at that time was that many of the workers had financial situations which, if they went to the bank, would lead to a lot of difficulty for them. Many of them didn't have the resources to get the kinds of loans that they needed for very important projects, very urgent projects in their work and life. We could work with them as a credit union and going as far as possible, far more than the banks would be prepared to do in ensuring that we offered assistance.
There were some opportunities, that came my way. If it wasn't for the credit union, it would not have happened, right? One of them was my education. I went to St. Joseph's Convent in Port of Spain. When I left school, I wanted to further myself. I decided to do the associate's degree in computer science, right, in the Hearst. And of course, the credit union was right there. In fact, that was the first time that I was able to get a loan. And of course, with the guidance of the loans officers at the time, they were very, very kind and accommodating, right? Because of the credit union, I got my first little loan, got my degree, my associate's degree initially in computer science. I had a hunger for IT and so on. So I decided to do the Bachelor of Science degree. So again, where did I go? To the credit union.
Welcome back, Alysaa.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our viewing audience. And I can't believe it is 7:15 already. Wow.
Time flies when you're having fun.
You could say that again. So our last question, and we'll try not to take too long, because I want to get maybe one or two questions from the viewing audience to shoot at us, and maybe you can have the opportunity to answer them. So the last question, because we have so many influences around us, that sometimes our relationship goes south, sometimes not because of us, but because of the external factors that are around, such as the media and pornography. How do we deal with those things in our daily lives?
Yeah. Well, I think that we all know that external factors and influences, they are not new at all. I think the ease in accessibility, particularly when it comes to pornography and social media even, it has changed the playing field. So the issue of pornography, it's not a new thing in relationships, but that accessibility has increased people's consumption habits, and it can really aggravate some of the pre-existing tendencies and some of the circumstances around us. For example, Trinidad and Tobago continues, I think starting in 2019, to top the Google trends in searching the words free porn. So we see, yes. So we see how things like affordability and anonymity can truly influence people's behaviors and engagements with these external factors. And in this case, It's not just one person that's being singled out, it's an entire country. So, there's
Yes.
power in numbers, I suppose. But there is so much research on this very topic, and the results can truly vary based on a number of factors. But this is what we have found. On a broad scale, these external factors, such as social media or pornography, they are neither good nor bad. However, if we are finding that these external factors are causing us emotional distress, whether it be for ourselves or our relationship, if it's interfering with our daily functioning, then it is probably a good idea to examine our relationship with these factors, such as social media or just the general media or even pornography. We have to examine what function it serves in our life. So I think the earlier research would have told us that, yes, things like pornography has negative consequences for both the user and their partner. So some of the damaging effects we would have been told about early on is that it can make us very isolated. It can distort our beliefs and perceptions about relationships and sexuality. It can create these negative feelings about ourselves. And it can lead to some people neglecting other areas of their lives. So the fact of the matter is that pornography and social media, for that matter, may very well cause dissatisfaction in our lives, in our relationships. But it's not just about this issue of using or consuming these forms of media, but rather, what does the using mean for us and for our loved ones? And, often in my work as a therapist, I see this complex network of factors, similar to what we may see in somebody who overeats, or somebody who drinks alcohol, or someone who may be a gambler, or somebody who self-harms. All of these are different ways of self-medicating or attempts at self-soothing, right? Not necessarily in the healthiest way, but it can be a very compulsive behavior, meaning we don't give much thought to how or why we are engaging with ourselves and others in this way. But as I said earlier, people have a series of experiences which shape the way they cope with the world. So here's what I would like us to consider when it comes to the question. The first thing is that healthy relationships are built on trust. To be intimate with somebody means that you have to make yourself vulnerable. So we're trusting that our partner will respect our vulnerability and honor us. So explore that need to invite others into the realm of your relationship. And this isn't exclusive to pornography. We see in social media where there are people maintaining whole relationships and flirtationships. That's just a word I made up. With people online in secret.
Yes.
And this is also directed to family members who want to have a say in your relationship. So all of these external factors, it's likely that if something breaks trust, be it whatever it is, it will invite these feelings of violation and resentment will usually follow. So that broken trust will take a long, long time to heal. The next thing is that the key to a long-lasting and strong relationship is about the ability to build emotional intimacy. You hear what I say? Emotional intimacy, not sexual intimacy. Emotional intimacy is what can make a relationship meaningful. And I love that you just asked couples viewing to turn to each other and say, what it is that's meaningful, because interestingly enough, fondness, the qualities of fondness and admiration are two of the greatest predictors in relationship success. This is replicated research. So fondness and admiration. So ask yourself, do I truly like and value and admire the person that I'm with? Outside of their appearance, outside of the things that they could provide me with, outside of the things that they could do for me, do I like their character? And then, how am I demonstrating that with my behavior?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that is an important thing to consider. And then lastly, I think we know that pornography can create some very unrealistic expectations about sexuality, about our partners. So in the past, research would have shown that pornography, and again, social media as well, can influence our impression of what a normal body is supposed to look like and what sexual behavior is supposed to be. Sexual behavior is supposed to be mutually satisfying and emotionally intimate. So in contrast, this consumption of pornography can emphasize more about performance and self-gratification, which is not fully serving the relationship. So I think all in all, it's about being mindful and more intentional when it comes to our behaviors. And that's really just being open to our unconscious habits over time, because it can truly become this crutch for us, and it's not serving our best selves, and it's not serving for us to have healthy relationships. So we truly need to be mindful.
Wonderful. It's now 7:25.
Yes.
Could you believe it? So, to our viewing audience, my apologies. I'm a man to my word, but because of time, we won't be able to take any questions. But what we will do, you can post your questions online, our Facebook page, and we would engage Alysaa in answering and post back the answers on Facebook. And of course, there would be a lot more to come. I wouldn't say a part 3, but I'm just saying there'll be a lot more to come. So at this time, Alysaa, we just want to invite Ms. Tricia Mitchell to just give the closing remarks, and then we'll come back to you.
Good evening, everyone. So before I begin the vote of thanks, I must first mention how moved I was with today's session. So many things discussed this evening resonated with me, but what stood out the most was finding peace in your life after facing hurt. Understanding that the process is a journey that involves grief on many levels, and that recovering from hurt can involve shame, confusion, frustration, and so many other emotions. We all would have faced hurt at some point in our lives, whether through friendships, romantic relationships, relationships with family, etc. But the information imparted today can definitely help each and every one of us to cope with hurt, to let go of resentment, and to work towards forgiveness. At WESCU, we are not only concerned about the finances of our members, but we are also concerned about their well-being. During this pandemic, we all would have been faced with one adversity or another, and this webinar would have given us the guidance, courage, and faith to deal with these adversities. And it is for this reason we must first thank the Almighty Father for making today's webinar a complete success. To you, Mrs. Alysaa, the Gazon-Roberts of Douglas Associates Ltd, we say a heartfelt thank you for not only teaching us about the importance of maintaining healthy relationships, but also for educating us about how this impacts our mental health. I am quite certain that the information shared with us over these sessions will definitely assist each and every one of us in getting the best out of our relationships. We thank the board and management team for having the wisdom and foresight to equip our membership with the tools required to deal with any challenges they may face mentally. We thank the staff and technical team for their support in ensuring the success of yet another webinar. We thank the membership for their participation and for allowing us to share this vital information geared towards helping them in a holistic way. We know that our members have been positively impacted by the knowledge gained and will continue to use all that they have learned in their day-to-day lives. To each and every one of you again, we say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks so much, Tricia. And once again, my heartfelt thanks to you, Alysaa, to Dr. Diane Douglas, to Denise, to Hannah, to everyone out there in Douglas Associates. I want to say our sincerest thanks. And as I often tell Dr. Douglas, this is a lifetime relationship now. So you all are not going anywhere as we continue to build our brand and reposition ourselves and to ensure that the membership get the healing that they want to live a holistically blessed life. So I want to say thank you very much. And as we come to an end, people, remember that you were created for greatness. Remember that you weren't created to be victims. Learn to forgive and let go. And I would recommend that each of you purchase Bishop T.D. Jake's book, Let It Go. And that would also help in the healing process, along with all the beautiful things that Alysaa shared with us this evening. So our songstress will take us out with a national song.
God bless our nation of many varied races. May we possess that common love that binds and makes us one. Let it be known around the world that we can boast of unity and take our pride in our liberty. God bless our isles of tropic beauty rare, of flaming Point Sienna and shady Motel. The warm and sparkling waters that break upon our shores beat out a tune that seemed to tell we take